Happy politics, and welcome to the show that when Dr. Bonnie Henry finally reduces podcast to essential only, this will definitely be on the first list of people eliminated. No, just kidding. Welcome to BBC Poly Hot Stove. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
It's Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications, Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Maclean, it looks like you're joining us from Jurassic Park. Lovely brontosaurus is behind you.
We had to rearrange the living room slash office slash eating area, hashtag condo life. And the only way I can actually get a hardline connection is by sitting in the corner. And this is what, when you're married to basically a paleontologist, this is what life looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Very good. Hey, nobody puts baby in a corner, but there you are.
But they do put me in a corner.
That's right.
That's totally allowed. Baby stuff is taking over most of the room in front of me that you people can't see. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can't see anything, and you're wondering what the hell Jordan and I are talking about. But if you are listening on Spotify, there's a good chance that you're feeling kind of down, because the whole province is feeling pretty down right now. It's if you note a quick survey on social media, places like Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, or even just the articles you're reading in places like The Sun and the Orca. Things aren't going very well, Jordan. We're leading the country by a huge margin in the P1 variant, which is more resistant to vaccines. It's more infectious, and apparently it's more dangerous. We set a record yesterday with people in ICU. Most of them are in the 30 to 40 age bracket. It's bad times.
Yeah.
These dark days, Jordan.
Well, look, and if you're looking for an escape and you're going to your NHL standings, that's not helping you any, because it's the Vancouver Canucks who've had the most profile outbreak of this Brazilian variant. We have the most of this Brazilian variant in any part of the world other than Brazil. Never good. One fears that they may start calling it the British Columbia variant here if we're not careful. Two things. So over the weekend, Mario Canseco's latest polling was out for business in Vancouver, and this is this latest outbreak and John Horgan's, frankly, idiotic comments about, don't blow this for us youngsters. But it had already shown that, whereas public support about a month or two ago for, public health measures for the provincial government and how they've handled the pandemic was about 85%. It had dropped to below 2/3 for the first time, 65-ish%, which is still overwhelming majority. Look, I'm not sure you could get British Columbians, 65% of us to agree that the sky is blue on any given day. But it is trending downward. One suspects that after this week, it's probably gone even further down. I'm not sure how anyone watching this skeptically or without very orange-tinged glasses could think this was a great week for the NDP government. There's been a turn. There's been a turn on Twitter. People who've been upbeat and encouraging all the way through have turned sour. There's a lot of mental health, stuff going on. People they're tired of it. We thought the end was close thanks to the vaccines. That rug's been pulled out from underneath us. And even the fact that this variant can, it's a little bit vaccine resistant, and it can also strike people who have already had COVID once. You're seeing stories on social media from doctors, saying, look, we're overrun at emergency rooms. And then you get kind of tone deaf, boring, same old from the provincial government, let's bend the curve, not the rules. I don't blame, I'm exhausted. I think I tweeted out on Friday, I haven't felt this pessimistic about BC's pandemic response in 15 months. This is not going well.
Yeah, you mentioned the messaging, now is not the time to bend the rules, that kind of stuff. This is stuff that, if it worked, if it was the reason things were going well last March, April, in the summer, well, fine, it worked then. It's not working now, and I think you're seeing a little bit of alarm and dismay from people who are thinking, we're seeing the numbers, realizing that things are not going well by any objective measure here in BC, and wondering, if this is the only tool in the provincial government's public health messaging box, we're in a lot of trouble. The time to adjust was a couple weeks ago, if not well before that, and yet we're still being told well, we recommend against non-essential travel, but we're still adding sailings over the Easter long weekend and things like that. And we're not even getting into, the don't blow it for the rest of us, which, while a change in public health messaging, was not a productive one. No. It's hard to find people who were, I don't want to say cheerleading before, because it's too dismissive, but you don't see that you don't see that same kind of like public reinforcement that we saw even just a couple months ago.
Yeah, there's a sense of almost despair in what's going on, and I think part of it is, I think the Canuck thing is instructive in a lot of ways, because you're coming to this point where you're like, shit, like maybe nothing I do really matters in this. You hear about people who have barely left the house and they catch it, and then you look at these crazy anti-maskers and they never seem to catch it, and you're like, there's this swirl, right? Like the Canucks were being tested every single day, even on their week off, the spring break. They had a week off. They had to come back to the arena every day and be tested. They're the young fittest athletes in British Columbia. The paragons of our region when it comes to athleticism. They're our representative to the world. They're basically in their own little bubbles. With their families, but they took this seriously. They were masked. You see, they're masked. You see them doing all the right things, and 17 of the 23 Canucks are on the list. It's crazy. So, you kind of wonder, well, if that's going on, if you're a school teacher, you work in a school, you have kids in school, you're like, well, if the Canucks PPE failed and it didn't keep this thing out, if it gets into my kid's school, what does that mean? If it gets into the grocery store where my daughter works, what does that mean? There is a sense of dread that we haven't seen since that, early days in March and April last year when everything was completely locked down. And I don't really know what the government does about it. Do you call a circuit breaker and send everyone home to online learn for 2 or 3 weeks? I'm in a workplace today. We're in lots of space, masked, every PPE precaution possible, following the WorkSafe COVID rules. But that WorkSafe hasn't changed the rules based on the variant. So, these are difficult questions for families and workers and just normal British Columbians to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I think is driving some people crazy is, I remember having a casual Twitter conversation with, I don't even remember who with, a couple months ago, and they had said something to the effect of, once we're all vaccinated, whenever that is, are we going to be able, I think what she specifically said was, am I going to be able to hug my mom? And, not to alert the censors here on the interwebs, but my response was, we fucking better be. If we get through all this, and getting through means, well, everything is pretty much the same. We're still wearing masks. You're being told not to be not to see the people you love. Well, no, I'm not. I can't do this for a couple more years. So no. There is now. At the time, I thought that was a given. It was obvious. Once we're all vaccinated, life is going to go more or less back to normal. But there is an undercurrent now saying, well, with the variants, we may not be able to. And I mean, that I think is making people, I don't want to say panic. It's not a panic, but I think you mentioned dismay and despair. I think that's much more accurate out there. I'm not seeing a lot of panic. I am seeing, it's not even people giving up, people just kind of grimly accepting that this isn't going anywhere and that we flubbed it here in BC, or are flubbing it currently. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think after a year, we all felt like we were pretty educated on the risks, and we had all kind of determined what is our risks that we're willing to take, and how do we mitigate those risks. And this has thrown a real monkey wrench in it. And look, if you have kids at home, this has been a year like never before, and now you're talking about a big chunk of your son's life has been spent in this. This is the normal for him. He doesn't remember pre-normal, and my kids are going through major milestones, struggling through the grief. My daughter is student council president. Last night, do I tell us? Well, last night she was very upset because she just received word from the school that all student council meetings now will be back to online. And that's she spent 5 years working up to being student council president in her grad year, and she had great plans. None of them have been able to come to fruition. She's done amazing under the circumstances, but it's not the year she had planned. She's getting ready for grad. She's like, are we even going to have a grad? I've got a dress, I got shoes, I got all this stuff. What does this mean? So it is that thing. The other thing is there's a frustrating hypocrisy coming from the provincial government in a lot of these regulations, right? Like, so what were we told? Don't travel, don't travel. Mm-hmm. Well, the ferries weren't just running on Easter weekend, they were running with extra sailings. That is fully controlled by the BC government. The provincial campgrounds were open and accepting people to go camping. Yeah, outdoors, sure, but if you're not supposed to travel, are you, for Golden Years, were you making sure there was only people from Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows accessing? Of course not. But campgrounds were open. Even Dr. Bonnie got a rough ride on social media over the weekend because she was spotted at a helijet on Friday flying back from Vancouver to Victoria. She may have been having the most essential meetings in the world in person in Vancouver, although one wonders if you can't do that online. But she still made the decision to travel back to Victoria where she lives. I don't begrudge her that, but a lot of people on social media were like, hey, you're telling us not to travel. You came into Vancouver last week and are going home. Like, that is not fair. It doesn't make sense. You saw the crowds headed to Tofino. You saw the restaurant in Oliver shut down because of the way they were being treated by travelers. My friend Brock Jackson, host of the tallest show in radio in a Soyuz, he talks about how a Soyuz was overrun with tourists this weekend. Like, I don't begrudge the people for going because they weren't told not to. And everything, despite what it's like parenting. Adrian Dixon and Dr. Bonnie were telling us one thing and then acting in a completely contrary manner. Well, kids follow what you act. Kids follow what you're doing. Kids respond to the behavior, not to the spoken word, right? And, the government's got to do a better job on this. It just comes down to that.
I mean, speaking purely personally, I had plans for months, actually, to go to the Gulf Islands this past long weekend. There's a place we could stay there where we would have been completely socially distant, and it would have been safe. But, when the new orders, not that they were orders, came through last week, they made the decision not to go. Mm-hmm. And my little guy was quite disappointed, but we thought it was the only responsible decision to make. And, it sucked, but I was okay with it. I was okay with it until the weekend when you saw all the reports, just like you said, in places like Nelson, you see the highway backed up going into Tofino. And, it was one thing to do the right thing. It's another thing to do the right thing and feel like a chump for doing it. Mm. And, I mean, that made it was a lot harder to swallow this past Sunday and yesterday than it was last week when I made the call, okay, we're not going. And I know that I'm not alone. I know that there are others out there who are doing their best and doing the right thing, but made to feel like, well, what's the point? Like, why am I sitting inside a condo on a beautiful long weekend when nobody else is? Yeah. It's, at a certain point, people like me are just going to say, you know what, I can't do a year of this if nobody else is. Like, what's the point? If they're all going out and having fun, I can't be safe just staying here anyway because one of these idiots is going to infect me at the grocery store. And so I'm not suggesting this is a reason to break the rules. I'm just saying these are some of the subconscious calculations and frustrations that play into people as they weigh out, if we're not there yet by Canada Day and people are starting to think, well, can I at least camp on Canada Day? A lot more people are just going to say, we're everyone else is, so what's the point? Why not?
Yeah, no, I agree. Today on Twitter, there were a bunch of people wetting themselves with excitement over the new, you can log into a website and put your name and personal health code in, and then they'll email you like an appointment when you're available to book an appointment for this thing. Like, you're just like, newsflash, the government has this information already. They give you the personal health number. They can get you at any time. All of us have put in for this stupid vacancy exemption, right? Like, they have our email addresses too. Like, they don't need this. It's just window dressing. But, I think people are so desperate for any life raft. They're like, oh, I've registered on a website that may, weeks from now, send me an email telling me when I can get my vaccine. Who cares? Where are the shots? Where are the needles? Where are the jabs? Give us that to me is... It's hard. And, you try to be positive because, in our house we have a rule, only one of us can be a basket case at any time, and it's not my day to do it. But at the same time, like, it's not enough. Like, we got to do more than this. So, and, I'm fascinated what, I think they have a briefing today, don't they, Henry and Dix?
I think so, yeah.
I bet they're keeping Horgan as far away from that as possible. It's the last thing you need is Premier Dad, coming in with the wooden spoon again and, messing things up.
Man, did that ever not go well?
It is so frustrating. It is so frustrating, and the shine's really coming off. Like, it's very clear last year we were lucky. We were luckier than we were good. And God bless the folks who had friends and family in China and in Asia who saw it spreading early, who masked up early, who took precautions early. They may have protected us from this. Whoever came back from Brazil with this variant did not. And that is the difference between then and now. Grassroots luck.
Speaking of grassroots and the pandemic and things that grow taller than a blade of grass, the story that led off the Fin this morning, and in fact in the Vancouver Sun, I don't know if you've heard of the air tax, those of you listening and watching, but the provincial government is now taxing small businesses based not on the actual ground that their business occupies, but on what might theoretically occupy it above. In other words, you're going to be taxed as though you are a tall building, even though you are a bungalow. This is not a new policy. This was introduced a couple of years ago, but they are now, as of, I guess, April 1st, surprise, hitting several small businesses in Vancouver with this for the first time during a pandemic in which it is universally agreed that small businesses have been hit very, very hard. It is really hard to understand why, if you accept that this policy must happen, and I do not, but if you do, why in God's name you would subject businesses to it now instead of, hopefully next year. And this is not a justification for the policy, but more an absolute dismay and shock that they would allow this to happen, immediately after the small business relief program bungle. It's just... It is astonishing. It could only have been an oversight. Maybe I'm being too generous. What do you think, Jordan?
I don't know how many times I have to tell you this, Maclean. The provincial government, the NDP government, does not care about employers or small business owners. They'll say they do, they'll give them lip service, but very clearly in their actions, their biggest incompetencies always come to bear on things that penalize small business and employers. And the great thing about this piece by Dan Fumano is he takes a restaurant that is beloved within the community, Las Margaritas, staple of Kitsilano. My wife and I, it's her birthday today, mine in 10 days from now. We've spent many joint birthdays at Las Margaritas with our kids.
Even I have heard of it, and I'm a Victoria guy.
Exactly. So this is a restaurant that right now, by the way, is limited to I think 6 tables on their tiny patio outside. So they can't even have people inside their restaurant. Although I'm sure they do a fairly brisk business on takeout. It's nothing like what they could be doing indoors, and certainly no one's getting margaritas at Las Margaritas right now. So this is mind-boggling. It's a $6,000 extra tax bill, not from the city of Vancouver, who we rightfully chastise over and over again, and who Unspun has created an entire brand around beating up in very rightfully incorrect ways. This is the provincial government screwing up and taxing, vacant residential land and defining vacant residential land as airspace above Las Margaritas, which has been there for 30 years. It's just... It blows your mind that this could even happen. When they brought it in last year, they said, no, we'll give an exemption for this year because obviously COVID and things are going crazy and we can't tax. That's not fair. One would think they would have taken the time over that year to be like, this policy is kind of stupid, right? Like, why are we pushing? Like, maybe we should just get rid of it altogether. No one seems to want it. It's frankly pennies in the overall $55 billion budget. But no, they brought it back. Restaurateurs are the ones who, and small business owners are the ones who are most on the hook for it. In a place where already businesses are shutting down because of COVID and because of high property taxes, we're actually going to add $6,000 more to the burden. It is frustrating. It is heavy-handed. It is embarrassing, and frankly, the NDP government should be held to account for it by voters of all stripes. This is not about vacant residential land. There is no land above Las Margaritas. It's air. It's thin air. Like, there's no suite to be rented. Las Margaritas isn't holding back housing from the poor, wonderful people of Vancouver. No, there's nothing there, and they're being taxed for it. It's mind-boggling.
That was a very articulate rant, and I don't think I can add to it. It's the discouraging thing to me is not only is it happening, but I saw some people that I think are very intelligent on Twitter saying, well, not only is this a great idea, we should be doing it to single-family homes. What? What?
It's the politics. It is the politics of envy. And Maclean, when I was at the Taxpayers Federation, internally we always had a saying: there's nothing more popular in a neighborhood of blue doors than a tax on a guy with a red door. People wake up. Vancouver taxpayers, wake up, provincial taxpayers. Nothing ever gets better when these folks bring in these stupid new taxes. You know why you hate the property transfer tax so much? It was a tax brought in on the wealthy that was only supposed to apply to the top 10% of housing in Vancouver. And guess what? Everything went up, and now it applies to virtually every piece of property multiple times as it's flipping through the process and becoming those wonderful condos that we so desperately need more of for everyone to live in. It is a huge cost driver. This is what happens over and over and over again. This is why I'm pissed off with people who support the Netflix tax. Oh, of course we should be charging PST on Netflix. Why should they get a free ride? Newsflash, Netflix isn't paying the PST. You're paying the PST, Rob Shaw. I'm paying the PST. You're paying the there's no, Netflix isn't sitting there going, well, gotta stroke a check for 7% to the government. No, we're paying it. Instead of coming out and saying, you know what, you're right, it is stupid that local products should get, local streaming services should have to pay, should have PST charged on them, and outsiders shouldn't. Instead of bringing everyone up to the highest tax level, why don't you knock it down and say, hey, why don't we give these small entrepreneurs a little tax break here and see if we can help encourage more streaming services in British Columbia? It is frustrating. It is irritating. This is why even though no one wants to defend rich people, and believe me, I don't want to defend rich people. I ain't rich. But at the same time, those high wealth taxes become everybody taxes after over a period of time. And if you don't believe me, look at the property transfer tax. Look why Bill Vander Zalm and Mel Couvillé brought it in, and ask yourself, how did that wealth tax end up becoming an everybody tax? Even if you're renting, it's an everybody tax because we can't even create enough rental stock for you because we got to create, you pay this property transfer tax over and over again every time the ownership changes hands. These people whose answer for everything is more taxes, just tune them out. Feel free to unfollow the CCPA and Seth Klein and all those folks who think that the only solution to the world's problems is more taxes. And by God, if we just tax them a little more, give me a break.
More people want housing.
I'm going to stroke it. I'm getting off this call. I'm getting off this call, and I'm stroking a donation to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Taxpayer.com. Send them some money.
The telethon numbers are running under the screen as we do. We'll do that in post. If you're looking at the housing crisis in Vancouver, where the very simply described as more people want housing than there are units being built on a yearly basis, and you look at that problem and your solution is to, well, let's knock down that restaurant. It's just, that doesn't make any sense. It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
Let's continue to veer outside my own personal comfort zone, only because I'm not a Vancouver guy and have never pretended to be. But Vancouver city politics are in the news this week, in that is it Vancouver's oldest political party, the NPA,
yes,
has their mayoral candidate for next year. He is the Park Board Commissioner, John Cooper, but that's not really what the story was. The story was how he became the candidate. Jordan, you're a former municipal politician. What did you think of this process?
Yeah, so Cooper, I think several-term Parks Board Commissioner, well-liked by everyone within the coalition. Sure, I get it. The problem is the mayoralty nomination was given to him by the board of directors of the NPA, not a vote in the membership, as is the norm. This is problematic for a few reasons. Number one, it allows his opponents to brand Cooper as an illegitimate mayoralty candidate. Second of all, you cut out any potential candidate who might have wanted to have run. What if, I'm just throwing it out there, what if Carol Taylor had wanted to run for mayor of Vancouver? She bumped her head and woke up and was like, I'm going to do something crazy today and run for mayor of Vancouver. I'm going to do it with the NPA. You've ruled her out completely. you've ruled out the current councillors. Sarah Kirby-Young, is that she's, I believe, a city councillor? Please do not quiz me on city councillors. You've ruled out the George Afflecks of the world, our affable Affleck _ host of the Unspun podcast. It is at a time where you need to get as many folks into the tent as possible to defeat Kennedy Stewart, who has been a disaster as the mayor of Vancouver. You might recall Kennedy Stewart, freaking out in May about how the city was going bankrupt, only to discover a couple weeks later that, maybe we weren't going bankrupt, and then a few months later discover, we've posted a record surplus. Yes, that Kennedy Stewart, the incredible fiscal manager, NDP, former NDP MP from Burnaby, Mr. Kennedy. That was a wrestling reference there.
That's a good one. That's a deep cut.
Mr. Kennedy. I've lost my train of thought because I'm thinking about wrestling. No, you've robbed the opportunity of the NPA to have a robust nomination race, which would infuse the party with new members, donors, people who are interested, workers, potential council candidates. And instead, you've just handed it to John Cooper for whatever reason. Maybe he's the best person. I don't know. But why not send him out to the public to be vetted? You've robbed yourself of that opportunity. And now you can see a world where Candy Stewart runs on the left, and on the center right, you got Ken Sim, who was the NPA candidate last time, still running around cutting Instagram videos and being chided by Justin McElroy. God bless you, McElroy. You're doing the Lord's work there. Mark Marison's running around. He's out there raising money. I don't know if we've ever talked about the Mark Marison for mayor I was going to say movement, but that's only alliteration, not fact. He's running, apparently he's running or interested in running for Vancouver mayor, a longtime backroom federal Liberal organizer. If there is a George Affleck or a Carol Taylor or a whoever, they can't, they're cut out of this. And you'll split the center right 2, 3, 4 times, and guess what happens then? Just like last time, Kenny Stewart walks in and is your mayor for another 4 years. It is frustrating. The NPA should be uniting everyone, not dividing the center right.
Well, and here's the weird thing. I mean, let's say you decide for whatever reason, and I agree with you. I'm not saying dismiss anything you just said, but let's say you decide that it was necessary to do it this way and that John Cooper has to be the guy for reasons that we're going to set aside right now. You just send a long weekend press release as a sort of by the way. There was no, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was no, not even a Facebook Live announcement, not John Cooper stands at a podium and takes your virtual questions. It was just sort of this happened. It was very strange. Yeah,
and there was no hint of it beforehand. There was no there's a big board meeting coming up this weekend. They're going to talk mayoralty candidates. Oh, really? People inside or near that party must be gobsmacked. I'm curious what the councillors have to say about it, and I'm sure Fumano and other folks McElroy are working the phones trying to get a hold of the Colleen Hardwicks of the world. See, I can name another NPA councillor. And trying to find out what's going on. But look, if the center right splits 2 or 3 ways again, you've got to find 2 or 3 splits on the left. So you better be hoping that some Green candidate decides to run against Candy Stewart and someone from the downtown east side community, the Gene Swanson groups decides to run. Otherwise, this thing has been handed over to Candy Stewart on a silver platter.
Can you imagine the reaction if tomorrow the BC Liberals just sent out a press release saying, oh, by the way, we've decided that doesn't matter who. Kevin Falcon's the candidate. That's it. And just a Sunday afternoon, well, we've done this, it's over. People would explode, and rightfully so.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you'd miss the opportunity to renew the party, and you would create these deep fissures forever. If you're, I don't know, I had no idea if he's interested in running. I just like George Affleck. For all the grief I give him on the underscore on this show, I really like him. But, let's say he was kicking the tires thinking of running. Now you've taken anyone who was an Affleck person kind of out of the mix. And if Jordan's deciding he wants to work on the George Affleck campaign, why am I going to go help the NPA now? They cut my guy out. They didn't even give him a chance for the nomination. It's one thing to be defeated in a nomination. It's another thing just to not have one at all. I do not understand the logic of that. I'm looking forward to seeing what the NPA president comes out and says. I want to hear John Cooper, and I'm dying to know what the councillors have to say about all this.
I suspect we'll hear a lot about this on Thursday afternoon, and I, for one, cannot wait.
Yeah, this is me waiting for Unspun.
Speaking of not being able to wait, Jordan, we have 2 official candidates That's right. If you're keeping score at home, this is our now weekly segment where Jordan gives us updates on the BC Liberal leadership race. Apologies for missing last week. And in that time, we've added a second official one with Gavin Dew, who was much rumored and in fact much discussed on this very show, saying that yes, he's in the running. He is. It's right now. It's officially, and we've talked about this before. There are many unofficial candidates. It's officially just him and Ellis Ross.
It's gonna be a small race, I guess. No, just kidding. First of all, let's talk about the great rollout of the Dew Crew. So the Dew Crew come together. That's their official hashtag. So I'm using it in context, people. Team Gavin comes together, and they're given this gift by the Premier of British Columbia, in which the Premier of British Columbia essentially kicks the snot out of young people, asking them not to blow it for the rest of us when it comes to COVID. Which then, of course, very predictably creates a backlash against the Premier, pointing out that these kids who are blowing it, and I'm using sarcastic quotation marks here, are the ones who are running all your frontline services, often have kids in school, because of housing affordability, are often living together in rental situations, are the ones running the grocery stores. Like, they're blowing it by actually keeping society running. So give us a break. And the Dew Crew was ready. They had clearly had all of their ducks in a row for a Gavin Dew launch. I'm told maybe it was going to be a few days down the road, but they pulled the trigger immediately because, of course, Gavin Dew is best known for the Something for Municipal Leadership Foundation.
Forum for Millennial Leadership.
Forum for Millennial Leadership. His whole campaign is about bringing 20 to 39-year-olds into the BC Liberal family, and they launched. Good piece by Katie DeRosa, the new Sun Legislative Bureau reporter, to kind of launch it. Good was on Mike Smith's show. Good social media launch. Beautiful video of him and Aaron and their lovely children. Everything that you could want in a launch. A good Facebook, kind of bursts out of the gates. Everything was lined up perfectly. They executed magnificently, and kudos to them. I see Rebecca Scott's involved. I saw nice things from Stephen Smart. I'm not sure if he's involved or not, or just a fan like me. But the Dew Crew certainly was up to the challenge there. And that's congratulations to Gavin getting in the race. That's 2. I'm fairly confident there'll be 5 more. It gave the race a much needed shot in the arm. And I have to say, the complete opposite of the Ellis Ross. The complete opposite of the Ellis Ross launch, which was, Ellis not wanting to lie to the local reporter in Terrace when he called, or saying, I guess it's out there, I guess I'm in. This was well packaged, well executed. An op-ed in Business in Vancouver, he did it well.
But as you say, on the fly. I mean, you're right to point out that it was a fairly comprehensive sort of media blitz.
Yeah.
But the fact that, as you say, it had been done sort of early, triggered by an obvious opportunity created by the Premier, and I think that they were smart to jump when they did. But lining all that up in quick succession is pretty impressive. Now, granted, with a pandemic, there's no pressure to do like a big public event with balloons dropping and all that stuff. And so that obviously removes a big piece of the equation through no fault of anyone's. But yeah, right. They got a great article in the Vancouver Sun. They get the with Katie DeRosa, the op-ed in BIV, and just a really good sustained social media blitz. So, I mean, whatever your take on the BC Liberal Party or this race in general, this is an impressive first week for Gavin Dew.
Yeah, I think Gavin is serving notice that he is here. He's in it to be a presence, a force. There's sometimes people get in races and you're like, oh, they're just trying to build profile. I think Gavin's in this race to win it. He wants to win this badly. He's got an excellent team who he's worked with over time at FML. They're young, they're hungry. They know that expectations, I think, are lower for Gavin than for Kevin Falcon or Michael Lee or an Ellis Ross. They're going to surpass them, and if this organizational blitz shows you anything, it's that they've got to be taken very seriously in this race. Gavin will call all 85 members in Nelson Creston and try to talk to them. And anyone who's talked to Gavin in person knows he's a smart guy, very affable, very affable again. Drink every time I say affable, people. But smart guy, beautiful family. He's got lots of selling features there. So kudos to them. Good job, Dew Crew. And I'm not sure who's going to take flight next. I don't think it'll be Falcon, but it wouldn't surprise me if an Aaron Gunn was next one in the race, maybe.
Well, I mean, there'll be more and more as now that Ellis, I mean, you mentioned his sort of almost accidental scoop in the local newspaper there. I mean, these things happen. So Gavin Dew was kind of the first official launch, and now that somebody's gotten the first scratch on the car, yeah, I think you're right. There'll be more will come. I think there was a hesitancy to go first, but with that opportunity the Premier created with his comments, and of course Gavin's brand with millennials. It was right that they went when they did, and I think you're right. I have no particular insight here other than saying now that the first one's out, more will follow in fairly short order.
Yeah, the NDP jumped right on Gavin, put out a press release deriding him. That to me was more about the NDP smarting over the Premier's comments. And I can't imagine if you're a 28, 29, or 35-year-old staffer in the NDP land or in the Premier's office, can't imagine you're terribly enthused with being told that you're part of the problem, whether direct or indirectly. I do think there's 5 others. So we talked about Dew and Ross, Mike Lee, Aaron Gunn, Kevin Falcon, Val Litwin, Renee Merrifield. And then Tom Shapitka, I'd kind of put into is he not MLA for Rufflestoke?
Kootenay East. Yes.
But I will tell you
Kootenay
this.
East.
Easter weekend, Tom Shapitka liked ICBA's profile and a few others on Facebook. So I don't know. That's a deep cut there, but when you're starting to out of the blue various center-right pages on Facebook, but sometimes a breadcrumb.
Huh. Well, there you go. We might have more to discuss next week. We missed last week. Apologies for not being able to line up our schedules. It does happen. Jordan has a day job, as you can tell by the banner behind him. Again, only if you're watching on YouTube. But so next week we have every intention of being here. And Jordan, have we missed anything this week? I know we're doing 2 weeks of shows at once here.
Yes. Well, the 12th is the throne speech.
Yes.
So I have no idea what the NDP think are important, but you can bet that the Premier will be keen to change the channel from the disastrous past week or so. And then week after that, federal budget on Monday, BC budget on Tuesday. So get ready for bazillions of your dollars to be flowing out of.
That's going to be a very long couple of days. And you're right. I guess we'll talk about the throne speech in more detail next week. But it will be interesting, given what we talked about off the top, with the mood in BC changing perceptibly. It will be interesting to see if those writing the throne speech, speaking of being nimble, are willing to, pivot on the fly and make a few adjustments to reflect that changing tone, as opposed to what might have been a much more, I don't want to say triumphal, but a much more sort of, here's our record, and we went to you and got a mandate, and it's because of we've handled this pandemic so well. I mean, I could see them reading that speech a couple weeks ago. Later this month, it would be remarkably tone deaf to do that. So we'll see.
Yeah, even if they're down, even if infections trend downward from the 1,000 a day back, I mean, by then you're still gonna be at 800-ish, even if the precautions have worked. So I can't see them taking any kind of victory lap. But that may actually, serve to slow their policy agenda, which is great for organizations like mine who are concerned about their policy agenda when it comes to labor. Anything you can do to kind of slow it down. But look, it's April. When was the election? October. So we're already, 7 months into this mandate, and they've really done nothing except, kind of tick people off. My suspicion is first day of question period will be around this thin air tax. Although,
yeah.
I mean, I can't believe the NDP would be stupid enough to allow this to be an issue for that long. But when you, ideologically believe that, more taxes means more happiness and more good things, maybe they are that dumb.
Well, time will tell. It always does. Until next week, he is Jordan Bateman. I am Maclean K. This is a Sauropod. Happy politics.